good day. I hope this video finds you well. I'm Geordy Coleman, and welcome to my Comedy Corner. So, I went into this movie the first time I saw it, not knowing what to expect. I had heard a couple people talk about it, but nobody really specific. And I actually bought it at a flea market. It was like $2. My thought was, for $2, how could you really go wrong? So I bought it, and I actually sat on it for quite a while before I actually decided to pop it into my DVD player and check it out. Now, if you're a person who's avoided it, chances are you've avoided it for one of two reasons. Number one, you think maybe somehow it'll endorse smoking. That isn't the case. Or possibly you have this feeling that it is somehow going to be an anti-smoking message. Still not the case. Don't get me wrong. This movie definitely highlights that big tobacco companies are the bad guy. There is no question in that sense. So what in all is this movie about? Well, it's about a lobbyist. It's about a lobbyist who works for the tobacco company and also illustrates how lobbyists and people of that nature can kind of spin things to make it their own favor. There is a beautiful scene in this movie where the main character is talking to his son. And they're having a discussion about what kind of ice cream is better, chocolate or vanilla. His son takes the position of chocolate. He takes the position of vanilla. And his son does make a relatively compelling argument for a child, simply saying, chocolate is the best ice cream. I don't need anything else. To which his father rebuttals him in a sense of going, but chocolate isn't good enough for everybody. Everybody deserves some sort of choice when it comes to the matter of ice cream. I'm paraphrasing this, of course. And his son kind of looks at him and goes, but you didn't change my mind. And he goes, that's not the point. The point isn't to change your mind. The point is to change everybody else's mind. Not even to change their mind, but to get them all on his side. Now, in the hands of the wrong people, this could be very dangerous. But it's also a very important factor of the movie. The other thing that I really find interesting about this movie is that it's a movie about smoking. It's a movie about smoking cigarettes. Think about a movie that has a subject in it. Think of any stoner movies for that matter. Do they ever avoid smoking a joint? Or taking a hit from a bong? Or toking on a pipe? No. In many movies, there's other drugs involved too. This is one of the few movies that I have seen that has a subject that's never actually shown. You do understand that the main character is a smoker. And you actually come to figure out that he's quite a heavy smoker. But at no point in the movie does anybody ever light a cigarette while they're on camera. So it is really possible to do the whole tell, don't show and have it be well done. So, all in all, I really enjoy this movie. The movie has kind of a little bit of a quirky funniness to it. And the funniness really revolves around the main character. So the main character, Nick Naylor, is employed by a big tobacco company. And it's his job to promote people smoking. And in one part of the movie, there's an awesome part where he is talking to the old Marlboro Man. For those of you who don't remember this, there used to be an ad campaign. I barely remember it, to be completely honest. But there used to be an old ad campaign for Marlboro cigarettes. And of course, the guy on the back was a cowboy, uber masculine man, which was needed at one time because there was a period of time where cigarettes were looked at as kind of a feminine thing. So they tried to take one of the most rugged occupations there are, or quite possibly they just decided to take one of the people from the Village People. I don't know. I wasn't in the room. And said, this is going to be our mascot. Camel Cigarettes has Joe Camel. We're going to have the Marlboro Man. As it turns out, at least as far as the movie goes, the original Marlboro Man has cancer from smoking and is now a person speaking out against tobacco consumption. So, Nick Naylor, showing that he is not a good person, decides, I'm going to take my son and show him how we do business. And the reality is, the business is just a payoff. They just throw a bunch of money at him and go, we cool? And that's more or less the end. Now, the Marlboro Man definitely has a chance to kind of be like, well, this is my issue, and no, I'm not going to take a bribe. But Nick knows. Everybody has a price. So you might be thinking to yourself, okay, maybe the movie does sound kind of interesting, but how is it comedy? Well, it kind of has a little bit of a dark comedy edge to it. This movie is not blatantly a comedy movie. It's definitely not advertised as it. But it works very well as a comedy drama. Now, to most people, for something to be comedic, it has to be very rapid fire in its comedy. But when you inject a heavy dose of drama into something, you can take a lot of the comedy out of it, and it still becomes very interesting. For me, the funniest part of the movie was when Nick gets abducted by effectively the other side. And what they do to him is they put nicotine patches all over his body, expecting him effectively to die from nicotine overdose, which, by the way, is a thing. But fortunately, because he's such a heavy smoker, he survives it. But one more cigarette might kill him. So he takes that and interprets it as, oh, being a smoker saved my life. Where's the press coverage for this? And it also kind of demonstrates, to a subtle amount, exactly how powerful an addiction like cigarettes are. Now, the thing that I really appreciate about this movie is that it is very clear, like I said, big tobacco is the enemy. But it also shows a parallel to people who, for the most part, you would think are fighting on the side of good, can be just as cold-hearted and black as the people who are clearly the villains. This isn't something you could do with many types of movies. And that's part of the reason why I enjoyed this one so much, is because it shows that just because you might be on the side of right, you can still be a dickhead. The proper place is normally somewhere in the middle. And if I could get on my soapbox a little bit, the proper way to handle somebody who is smoking, if you care about them and love them, is not to show them statistics, not to show them facts, because here's a secret: they already know. It's not that. It's an encouragement. It's love and compassion. And progressively it'll win out. You know? But showing them statistics, aren't you sure? Don't you know? To which, like my favorite comedian ever very specifically said, non-smokers die every day. There's always a response. There's always some way of twisting things around. Now, the beauty of this movie, and the reason why it ended on a pretty high laugh for me, is because Nick Naylor ends up leaving the tobacco company. And shortly after he leaves, everything kind of comes crashing down. It becomes very exposed that cigarettes do in fact cause cancer and other types of health issues, and that the tobacco companies and the lobbyists working for the tobacco companies have effectively been spinning everything completely out of control for a number of years. What's the opposite of deja vu, by the way? Anyway, so the reason why I find it hilarious is that at the end, Nick Naylor is working for cell phone companies. For those of you who don't know, there was a time when cell phones hypothetically may cause some sort of health issues, such as brain tumors and things of the like. It kind of ends on the fact of, if you're good at something, stick to it. Nick Naylor was good at talking, so of course, he's always going to do something that brings it that. But it's a little bit more than that, because you can also tell that Nick Naylor is a person that wants the challenge that comes along with a difficult job. You know, at one point, it was very hard for cigarette companies to try and, promote cigarettes. It was very hard, and a lot of people had issues with cell phones. Now they're everywhere. So, it's weirdly unsettling at the end, but still kind of funny. Now, of course, I've skipped over many aspects of this movie because my hopes is that you'll watch this and check it out. But this is supposed to be a review, so let's get to that. I don't think this movie has ever really been all that popular, which is kind of interesting, especially considering a lot of the cast is pretty well-known actors and actresses. But it's also based on a book. And because it's based on a book, it definitely has a certain level of influence. I personally have never read the book. And I think it's kind of the opposite effect of what some people who are huge fans of a book won't go to see a movie, because somehow that movie is going to ruin the image in their head that they have from the book. In an aspect, this is kind of the opposite way, because I can't see this working any better in a book than it does for a film. So I'm going to give this kind of a middle ground for longevity, 5 out of 10. The nostalgia factor for me is actually pretty high, because I first saw this movie shortly after it was on DVD, which is kind of interesting seeing as I bought the DVD for like $2. So I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 for the nostalgia factor. I didn't laugh a lot, but the laughs were very enjoyable. So a 5 out of 10 on that. And I will say, there isn't a huge amount of fans. This isn't a Star Wars or an Avengers movie. But at the same time, it's a little bit more than a cult following, at least in my opinion. So a 6 out of 10. I enjoyed this movie a lot, as you can tell by me gushing about it. So an 8 out of 10 on that. I will say this much. There is a character for the majority of different types of personalities that you come in contact with. So it's an incredibly relatable movie. So 7 out of 10 on that. I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10 for how well it holds up, just because this movie, in a sense, is kind of a period of its time where it's stuck in a specific place where there was a time period where cigarettes weren't known as being as harmful as they are now. So it doesn't hold up extremely well, but for those of us who kind of remember that era, for as brief as it was around for when I was born anyway, I want to give it a 6 out of 10. But one thing I will say is this movie is incredibly intelligent. One thing it definitely shows is it shows how somebody who has a silver tongue may not be the smartest person in the room, but they can make the smartest person in the room look like an idiot. So a 6 out of 10 for intelligence. The timing of this movie is amazingly edited. Like I say, I couldn't really think of a way to put it together any better than it is. So 7 out of 10 on that. And the chemistry between the actors and actresses in the movie, 8 out of 10. And like I said, I have left huge chunks of this movie out. So if this has piqued your interest at all, please take a look at it, because it is definitely worth it. It is not a movie that is ever going to see a sequel, because there's no reason to ever make a sequel for it. At least I hope not. But it is definitely a movie that is well worth the watch. So thank you very much for watching. Please do all the YouTube stuff. Like, share, comment, subscribe. And until next time, take care and keep laughing. Now, you might be sitting there going, okay, so fire truck and police.